Greetings, welcome to Facts About Everything. I'm your host, James Egan, and welcome to the second Halloween Horror Month. Last Halloween for Horror Month, I did a horror-based video every day for 31 days. That was back when I used to do one video a day. Now I do one video every 2 days. So this year, there's going to be 16 videos, not 31. If you think you're not going to get as much content as last year, don't worry. There's going to be a lot more effort into these videos. That's why I decided to start with Stephen King. But I'm not just going to talk about the writer Stephen King. I'm going to be talking about his books, his film adaptations, and even the only film he's ever directed, Maximum Overdrive. I won't be talking about certain ones like Carrie or Misery, because those films are such classics, they deserve their own video. So if you want me to do a video about them, let me know and I'll upload it later on this month. I've already done some videos that are adaptations of Stephen King's work, including The Shining, so do check that out if you want to know more. So, without further ado, this is 100 facts about the horror legend himself, Stephen King. Let's dive in. Not only is Stephen King the most famous horror writer ever, he is also the most successful American writer in history. Before Stephen King was a writer, he was a janitor. His first book was Carrie. He was writing it while battling depression and while under the influence of drink and drugs. At one point, he threw it in the trash, believing it was garbage. His wife, Tabitha, salvaged it and urged him to keep trying. It was published in 1974 and launched King's career. It was adapted into a film in 1976. When his kids were growing up, Stephen King didn't tell them bedtime stories. Instead, he made them tell him stories. Stephen King was hit by a minivan driven by a man called Brian Smith in 1999. The collision fractured his hip, broke 4 ribs, chipped 8 parts of his spine, shattered his leg in 9 places, and he required 30 stitches in his scalp. When King regained his mobility, he bought the van and smashed it with a sledgehammer. He then created a character called Brian Smith in his Dark Tower series. This character drove the same minivan and nearly ran down a fictional version of King in the book. The character is described as an irresponsible, mentally deficient drug addict. Hey, passive aggressive. King's lawyers had to buy the van that hit him in 1999 to keep it from appearing on eBay. King has the Guinness World Record for having the most movie adaptations of his work. In Stephen King's opinion, the best film adaptations for his books are The Shawshank Redemption, The Mist, and Stand By Me. After King became successful, he was worried that readers were buying his books simply because of his reputation. As a result, he wrote 7 books under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. These books were Rage, The Long Walk, Roadwork, The Running Man, Thinner, The Regulators, and Blaze. Although these books were well received by critics, some were criticized for being too similar to Stephen King. Stephen King suffers triskaidekaphobia, which means he is scared of the number 13. If King comes across a staircase with 13 steps, he has to skip one of the steps. He can't finish reading when he is on page 94, 193, or 382, since these numbers add up to 13. When a year has 3 Friday the 13th, including 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, he calls them Triple-Whammy Years. That's 12 Friday the 13th he has to put up with in the next 4 years. So good luck, King. Also, King got really scared in 1984 since he was married for 13 years, had a 13-year-old child, and had published 13 books by that point in his career. Wow, there was a time where Stephen King only published 13 books. Nowadays, he has published over 260 titles, which means that bit from the Family Guy was barely even an exaggeration.
For my 307th book, this couple is attacked by a lamp monster.
You're not even trying anymore, are you?
Overall, he has sold over 350 million copies of his work. He writes 2,000 words a day. His novel, The Tommyknockers, was the most successful book of 1987. Ironically, King thinks the book is dreadful since he was on so much cocaine while writing it. King said it would have been a good story if he cut 350 pages of it. He writes his work with a fountain pen and paper instead of a keyboard. King rarely signs autographs because he thinks it's absurd to glorify a horror writer. He suffers from macular degeneration. This is an incurable disease that will eventually leave him blind. He wrote the 304-page book The Running Man in 10 days. It was adapted into a film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. He writes 3 drafts of every book. King saw a friend die after being hit by a train. King was so devastated by it that he's repressed the memory and now has no recollection of it. He stands 6'4". He is worth over $400 million. Okay, let's look at some of his movie adaptations. 1408, which came out in 2007, is based on the 1999 short story by Stephen King. The story revolves around a haunted motel room. Anyone who stays in room 1408 will be dead in less than an hour. King wrote the story as he's always been fascinated by hotel ghost stories. And you may have already noticed this, The numbers 1408 add up to 13. And what's even creepier than that is, the film is exactly 104 minutes and 8 seconds. On the DVD, it reads the film is this long. John Cusack plays a paranormal skeptic, Mike Enslin. At the book signing, he says, "Stay scared." Night of the Living Dead director, George A. Romero, said this when he attended conventions. This is the second Stephen King adaptation that John Cusack has been a part of. He also starred in Stand By Me. Did he? He went on to star in Cell in 2016, which is another Stephen King adaptation. 1408 was inspired by the H.G. Wells short story, The Red Room. Now let's move on to the 1983 film, Christine. The story is based on Stephen King's novel, which was written the exact same year. In fact, King was so popular during the 1980s that this film went into production before the book was even published. The film revolves around a killer car, which is a 1958 Plymouth. Several Plymouth Fury cars were made to model for Christine. One of them was sold for $167,000. When the car Christine kills people, its windows are tinted black to make it look more sinister. The real reason this was done was to hide the stunt driver in the car. Because the windows were tinted black, the stunt driver couldn't see when he was driving. 15% of the budget was on cars, 2 of which were destroyed during production. Although John Cusack has done 2 films with Stephen King, he nearly did 3 because he auditioned for the main role. In Brazil, the title translates into the assassin car. In Peru, it's the diabolic automobile. In Italy, it translates into the infernal machine. Alexander Paul plays Lee. Sometimes Alexander's twin sister, Caroline, showed up on set and swapped with Alexander for certain scenes. John Carpenter directed the film. He didn't attend the premiere. Stephen King coined the word pie hole in the novel of Christine. It received a PG rating. Knowing that an R-rated movie would cause more controversy, the screenwriter, Bill Phillips, put in loads more swearing in the script. And that same year, another film adaptation came out, Cujo. The film revolves around a St. Bernard who goes on a killing spree after it contracts rabies. The dog's tail had to be tied down because it would happily wag its tail during scenes where it was meant to look sinister. This is based off the 1981 book of the same name. Stephen King was drinking so much alcohol at the time, he doesn't remember writing the book. Imagine that you get paid millions of dollars because it's something you don't even remember doing. 5 St. Bernards were used for the film. For certain scenes, Cujo was played by a man in a costume. For close-ups, a mechanical head was used for Cujo. That reminds me, in hindsight, I should have named my puppy Cujo because she is vicious. To make the St. Bernard attack the car, the dog's toys were placed inside. Danny Pintaro plays Tad. He had difficulty learning his lines since he didn't know how to read. For extreme close-ups, a Rottweiler was used instead of a St. Bernard since the crew members couldn't make the dog look scary. Try explaining that to the dog. I'm sorry, Cujo, you're just too cute. According to Stephen King, the name Cujo doesn't mean anything. The foam around Cujo's mouth was made from egg whites and sugar. These scenes were difficult to shoot as the dog kept licking its mouth. And now let's look at a very recent adaptation of Stephen King, the 2017 Netflix film, Gerald's Game. Gerald says, "All things serve the beam." This is a reference to Stephen King's Dark Tower series. Gerald calls the dog Cujo. You now know why. The tagline was, "Some games you play, some you survive." In France, Gerald's Game is simply called Jessie. The story has many connections to Dolores Claiborne, which was another novel written by Stephen King. Carol Struckman plays the Moonlight Man. He is best known for playing Lurch in The Addams Family and the Giant in Twin Peaks. The 1984 film Children of the Corn is based on Stephen King's short story, which was written in 1977. John Franklin plays the cult leader Isaac. Although the actor looks 12, Franklin was actually 24 when he starred in the film. Franklin suffers from a growth hormone deficiency, so he looks much younger than he is. In France, the title translates into Horror Kid. Stephen King's name was misspelled in the trailer. Stephen King. That is one of the easiest names to spell. The film spawned 5 sequels. Okay, I've already done this fact in my Charlize Theron video, but I have to say it because it's so funny. Oscar winner and actress Charlize Theron made her film debut in Children of the Corn 3. She has no dialogue and only screams in one scene. However, the director thought her acting was so bad, he dubbed in a scream from another actress. How bad do you have to be to not be able to scream properly? Now let's look at The Mist, which came out in 2007. The story is based on Stephen King's novel, which was written in 1980. The story revolves around a group of scientists who open a portal to another dimension which causes monsters to escape into our world. The director decided not to mention the portal to make the monster's sudden appearance scarier. The story in the book was the basis for the video game Half-Life. Stephen King found this movie terrifying, even though he wrote it. The director, Frank Darabont, said hearing this compliment was the highlight of his career. Also for the record, Frank Darabont directed 2 other Stephen King adaptations, The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption. In Venezuela, the title translates into Supernatural. 7 actors went on to star in the TV series The Walking Dead, which Frank Darabont also directed. He stopped directing it when he went completely crazy. Thomas Jane plays the lead role, David. Frank Darabont liked working with him so much, he wanted Jane to play Rick Grimes in The Walking Dead. Stephen King was supposed to cameo. In the opening scene, David is painting the gunslinger from the Stephen King series, The Dark Tower. And now I'm obviously going to talk about the ending to The Mist. If you haven't seen the movie, I will not spoil it, but please watch it because the twist was spoiled for me. Frank Darabont agreed to make the film with the studio Dimension if they didn't change the ending. Although Darabont was paid $15 million to direct the movie, the producers offered him double the amount if they changed the ending. Darabont refused as he had concocted the ending scene 20 years ago and believed he could utilize it perfectly for this film. Stephen King loved the ending so much he wished he ended the novel the same way. And what else is there? Oh yeah, Pet Sematary. This film, which came out in 1989, is based on a 1983 novel. King said Pet Sematary was the scariest novel he ever wrote, which is quite ironic because his family and friends hated it. King wrote the story shortly after his daughter's cat, Smucky, died. The film was nearly directed by George A. Romero. The tagline is, "A pet isn't just for life." There's a Native American demon in the book called a Wendigo. This creature was removed from the film adaptation. King cameos as a funeral minister. In the novel, Judd mentions a dog in a nearby town that went on a killing spree. This is an obvious reference to Cujo. And let's end it the best way possible. The only film that Stephen King ever directed. Maximum Overdrive. This film is based on the 1973 short story, Trucks. Machines come to life and start killing humans. In the beginning of the film, it is stated that machines came to life after being exposed to radiation from a passing comet. In the film's conclusion, it is stated that the machines were brought to life because of a UFO laser. Make up your mind, movie. In Mexico, Maximum Overdrive's title translates into 8 Days of Terror. Now you might be wondering, Stephen King is a writer, so why did he decide to make this film? Well, King was so disappointed with Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of King's novel, The Shining, he wanted to do his work justice, so he made this film himself. He even references this in the trailer.
He decided if you want something done right, you ought to do it yourself.
The face on the front of the main truck in the movie is based on the Spider-Man villain, the Green Goblin. Stephen King was taking so much drugs while making this film, it was basically co-directed by cocaine. Yeardley Smith, who is best known for playing Lisa in The Simpsons, said she was embarrassed that she appeared in this film. When the boy is crushed by a steamroller, a bag of blood below the wheel burst, giving the impression that the child's head exploded. Although King loved this effect, it was removed for the final cut. King wanted Bruce Springsteen to play the lead role. While filming, a radio-controlled lawnmower lost control and cut up a block of wood. Splinters flew everywhere, including in the eye of the crew member Armando Nannuzzi. Nannuzzi lost his eye and sued King for $18 million. When Stephen King was asked why he has never directed anything since Maximum Overdrive, he said, "Just watch Maximum Overdrive." And for the final fact, let's bring it back home. Stephen King was the first successful horror writer. Even legends like Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft couldn't make a living from their work. So it was a big deal when he became famous. And when it was on the newspapers that Stephen King was the next big thing in horror, this was his photograph. That is actually scarier than any book he has ever written. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. If there's anything else related to horror, writers, movies, TV, video games, let me know and I'll upload it as soon as possible. To learn more facts, check out my books on Amazon. They're available on paperback and Kindle. Thanks for watching. See you again.